Good morning, everyone. Walter Torres obtained his doctorate in clinical psychology in 1980 under the direction of Peter Osorio. He has been in private practice since then with domains of practice that have varied over the years from substance abuse to fitness for duty of those in risk-sensitive positions, forensic evaluation and testimony, the evaluation and treatment of troubled physicians, and the evaluation and treatment of injured workers. He is bilingual and bicultural of Nicaraguan descent. He has presented at the Society for Descriptive Psychology on a range of topics, most notably on the nature and effects of humiliation, which led to 2 peer-reviewed articles on that topic, written jointly with Dr. Ray Bergner. Please welcome Dr. Walter Torres.
Some of you have practiced mindfulness. You may refer to it as mindfulness meditation. Perhaps you have another locution for it. That you've practiced it some of you may practice it on a concerted and persistent basis for at least some period of your life. I suspect that some of you have practiced it during the last few days. It would not be surprising if some of you have heard of it, know of it, but have kept a distance from it. And I'm not going to be asking you to identify yourselves in any one of these categories at this point, but after the end of my talk, it might be interesting for some of you to let us know where you have stood in relationship to it. I'm a newcomer to mindfulness. That is, to mindfulness as a deliberate, concerted personal practice, and to mindfulness as a concerted user of it in the conduct of psychotherapy. A cousin of mine from Nicaragua investigated it, got into it, and knowing me as he does, he urged me, pressed me to delve into it. I took my time before doing so because I have a strong streak of ADD and wanted to prepare myself to take it on with enough organization and persistence that would qualify as having delved into it. So my arrival to it is recent, which I think brings some advantages and probably some disadvantages for the purpose of this talk. Whichever, my observations and understanding of its value have been derived from the perspective of a descriptive psychologist, hence of sharing my interest in sharing these with you. I'm going to start out with 3 concepts that are have a central place in descriptive psychology. And I know I will be speaking to old hands at descriptive psychology, and that much of this you will know, but I will say that I'm struck with how much I can enjoy simply revisiting these concepts, thinking of them, talking about them, and refining my understanding of them. And the 3 concepts here are actor, observer, critic. Peter Osorio lays out these 3 as jobs that are essential to being persons: actor, observer, describer, and critic. And we can describe each job. They are essential to being a person, as I said, and essential to the self-regulation of persons. An actor, the actor job, it's to do one's thing. That is, to act on one's impulses, desires, and inclinations. Characteristically, we do that spontaneously, intuitively, unthinkingly. It merits saying that part of the job of being a person is to have impulses, desires, and mere inclinations. As an actor, I assimilate the world to my doings in the context of my acting, and I am sensitive to what it offers me. In psychology, there are numerous characterizations of the specifics and associated features of this job. The book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, gives very vivid descriptions of this job, or mode, perhaps, actor mode, if you like. In descriptive, we developed a notion of actor's knowledge. In my own situation, it happened that as a result of the pandemic and the pain of being blocked from seeing loved ones, we came to the realization that we came to the decision to set up a second home in Long Beach, California, where we would be close to family. Rather than visiting them, then we would be living there. And after a few extended visits to our new place, which I now characterize as times of living there, I have been assimilating the world to my doings. And that's the words that Pete uses, assimilating the world to my doings. So the position of the dishwashers in relationship to the sink, which differ in Colorado and Long Beach, are now intuitively known. Muscle memory, as some people refer to it. The placement of the utensils is still a work in progress. But I have been assimilating this knowledge unthinkingly. It is simply assimilating the world to my doings. Our emotions and the actions prompted by those emotions are typically actor work. Our on-the-spot reactions are generally actor work. And in a few paragraphs in the behavior of persons, Pete alerts us to various points that are worth making in relationship to the actor job, in relationship to observer and critic. He says, there is nothing, this is page 245 in Behavior of Persons. There is nothing inherently primitive or organismic about the job of actor. This needs to be emphasized because it is commonplace in psychology to introduce a tripartite psychic structure, id, ego, superego, parent, adult, child, in which one part is primitive and organismic, one part is socialized and evaluative, and one part is neutral and reality-oriented. In such arrangements, conflict between the social and the organismic is inherent and essentially universal. Parenthesis, it would be nonsense to try to structure id, ego, superego as a negative feedback loop, and only slightly less so for parent, adult, child. Whereas actor, observer, critic is a feedback loop that we can, through which we self-regulate. And in reference to id, ego, superego, and parent, adult, child, he notes these are conflict resolution structures, not cooperative, synergistic structures. Worth noting in the context of this talk that I can prime my or your actor mode. If I were giving this presentation in a room in front of you, imagine that preposterous scenario, and I had a basketball in my hand and told you that I would be, without prior notice, suddenly throwing the ball to any one of you to catch, and you are to immediately throw it back to me, I will be prompting your actor work. So I could be there holding the ball, looking one way and suddenly throwing it to Ray. Hello, Ray. And Ray would throw it back to me. At this point, I may continue to look at somebody else and throw it back to him again, and he throws it back. And then I will look at Ray and I will throw it to Jane, who in a flash sends it right back to my head. And we will have been priming ourselves into actor mode. And for a while, during which actor mode has been primed, your actor readiness, your readiness as an actor is salient and paramount in comparison to critic and observer jobs, to critic and observer modes. Moving on to observer describer. As an observer, I note what is the case now, what is happening now, what has happened in the past and what happens generally, and how things work. Importantly, the results of observation are available to the person in doing the actor job and in doing the critic job. And for reasons pertaining to this talk, I'm going to skip now, without elaborating observer particularly at this point, toward critic. As a critic, I, in the work of critic, I taking on the job of critic, I evaluate whether what is the case and what is happening now are satisfactory. If things are good enough or better than just good enough, that judgment is available to the actor, as both critic and actor are free to enjoy that. If things are not good enough, as a critic, I formulate a diagnosis on account of what's wrong and a prescription of what to do differently to try to help matters. This prescription is the primary feedback to the actor who mobilizes to actualize it. Here's the feedback loop. In reference to the content of this topic, I will note that I can prime my critic and ask you to tell me about, for example, I might prompt your critic by asking you to tell me about the political figure whom you most disapprove of. I can ask you about that individual's lieutenants, and I might prompt a harangue of criticism from you. I can join in and prompt some more. And we may eventually, potentially descend into epithets. I might ask you to tell me about a performance that you recently saw and enjoyed, or a place that you visited, and what was so enjoyable about it. And we can make a night of this. And so here I have primed you, and perhaps myself, into the critic job. And critic activity may have become quite salient in comparison to mere actor or observer activity. Pete makes clear that we are doing all three jobs simultaneously in a multi-layered way. And we'll come back to these later in this talk. Okay, let's identify the subject matter. Some of you have engaged in a meditation or mindfulness practice with regularity, I suspect. Some of you may have practiced it in the last week or perhaps this morning. Oh no, hold on, something happened. Okay, you all disappeared, as did my text. We are back in the world, okay. I'm going to conduct an initial guidance of what I think qualifies as an induction into mindfulness, using one that I typically rely on when I'm introducing my clients to mindfulness. Mind you, it differs a bit from the usual forms of guidance into mindfulness in that it has one component of relaxation, as this is particularly designed for individuals who at the time that I do this are often between a rock and a hard place and have been very wound up. So I'm going to invite you to follow my instructions. It will be brief, just a matter of a few minutes. I recommend that you not analyze what I'm doing that you not engage in appraising what's Walter trying to do here, or what is this about, but rather instead, to just do as I say. To just do as I say, simply following the simple instructions. So soon after initiating this, you may want to close your eyes and direct yourself internally. I'm going to switch to speaker view. And it so happens, Ralph, that you and Mary are the ones. So you're going to be my subject here. As I said, soon after initiating this, you may like to close your eyes and direct yourself internally. It'll be a matter only of a few minutes. Okay, so please take a moment to settle into some comfort to lessen your postural discomforts and pressure points. If any of what I ask you to do causes you pain or discomfort, please free to do only as is comfortable for you. I will begin. Take a deep breath through your nose. Hold it for a second or two and release it slowly, like to a slow count of 5. Now simply engage in your ordinary breathing while you simply notice it. Again, take a deep breath, hold it, and again, release slowly, noticing the sensations of your chest as you release the air. A pause of ordinary breathing while you continue to settle into noticing your breathing. A third time, take a deep breath, hold it, and again release slowly as you notice the sensation of your chest as the air leaves it. Now simply continue to notice your breathing. Now again, take a deep breath, and as you do so, raise your shoulders to your ears. Hold them both. Now release both slowly at the same rate, so your shoulders and the air are fully released at about the same time. Take a moment to make sure your shoulders are truly released or dropped. We hold a lot more tension in our shoulders than we realize. A pause of ordinary breathing while you continue to simply notice the sensations of your chest as you inhale and exhale. Do that again. A deep breath with your shoulders up to your ears. Now let go of both again, slowly, noticing the sensations of the chest and of your shoulders as you release them. Shoulders dropped. A pause of ordinary breathing. Again, a deep breath, your shoulders up to your ears. Notice the tension and you release as you notice the sensations of the shoulders and of the chest as they drop and the air is released. Now simply continue to notice the sensations in your chest as you breathe. Your only task. And your breathing can become a touch longer, a touch more relaxed, naturally, without forcing it. Continue noticing the sensations of your chest as you breathe. Allowing the sensation of your breathing to become the occupant of your consciousness. And if your mind wanders to something else, simply notice that and gently return to noticing your breathing and allowing it to occupy your consciousness. Now notice the sensation of the air as it moves through your nostrils. It's a sensation that's always there. You sometimes notice it, sometimes not. You can notice it now. And again, return to noticing if your mind has wandered. Now, look to notice the sound of your breathing. Immersing yourself in its sound. And now notice that the rhythm and sound of your breathing is very much like the rhythm and sound of the waves of the ocean at the beach. Okay. I will now invite you to reorient yourselves to the present moment of this talk, the present social practice of this talk. And if you were my client, I would ask you, how was it? I'll note that that my exercise, unlike most inductions into mindfulness, has this one moment of relaxation of the shoulders, but it's serving to release you from a residual and hidden actor job, holding your shoulders tense and at the ready. When I ask my clients, so how was this? Often, the vast majority of the time, it is dramatically effective. There is usually a surprising evanescence of torment and preoccupation without the person feeling that they are impaired or missing something. It feels right and authentic. It is welcomed. In effect, the person has actually reveled in the present by focusing on and becoming immersed into observing a pleasant and engaging repetitive stimuli. The individual is guided to a focus on and an immersion in the present by persistently observing something in the present with actor and critic disengaged. It is achieved by persistently attending to a pleasant and perhaps interesting repetitive pattern. Thus, inductions into a state of mindfulness may be facilitated by a reverberating sound, such as a gong, or the sound of the waves of the ocean at the beach, or the sound of sensations of our breathing, or the sound and sensations of our steps, and so on. Or it could be a sight. In my old office, I had a teak bookcase right next to my client's seat. And after having my clients focus on a few breaths, I would ask them to place their gaze on the surface of the teak bookcase. And the sight of the woods marbling, again, these pleasant repetitive patterns, would exert a softly engaging and immersing effect. It was softly transformative of the individual's state of consciousness. And the change in state and of consciousness was often dramatic. And when I say dramatic, I am referring to the client's perspective, who is struck that in a matter of a few minutes, his mind is cleared and he feels unimpaired. In instructions to mindfulness, the person is often instructed to, or otherwise guided to, not think. What I think these instructions are really intended to achieve is that you are being asked to withhold appraisal. Recall my saying, don't try to figure out what I'm doing. So it's very easy for thoughts come to mind that the stew needed more salt, or that it came out just right, or is it time to get the car inspected? And in our culture, we admire this kind of appraisal a great deal, and you are advised to withhold appraisal, which is an interesting request. It's not one that we are often asked to do. You are guided to withhold appraisal. You are also advised to withhold staying at other places the mind goes to when daydreaming, for example, and I'm thinking of Ian in this context, since that's one of his core interests. And I've noticed that where the mind goes to tend to be such things as rehearsals or reenactments, ploys to gain status or prevent status loss. And you're advised that if such critic or actor phenomena occur, which they inevitably do if they present during this mindfulness exercise, to notice that they have occurred and to let them go in favor of merely attending to the sounds of sensations of breathing and to simply persist at that. Mindfulness instructions often include the advice to enact a stance of curiosity, kindness, acceptance, and openness. Those are really actually double negatives, which is basically don't be a critic. But it's a nice way of reminding and guiding the person to withhold criticism and to merely attend. So, besides clearing the individual's mind from the afflicting torment, which again, I regularly see this in a dramatic way across cultures, by the way. What else does this do? Well, remember when I spoke about priming. We can prompt and prime the actor mode such that actor functioning becomes way more prominent than observer and critic mode. We can prompt and prime critic mode such that it is way more prominent than actor or observer mode. And here, what is being primed and prompted to become preeminent in comparison to other modes is observer mode. And I find that to be a dramatic development. Culturally, we are highly oriented toward actor and critic modes. So to be in a preeminent actor mode or critic mode is very easy to conceive. To be in a preeminent observer mode, in my estimation, is not as readily conceivable in our culture. In my early 20s, for a couple of months, I took up drawing. I have no appreciable innate talent at drawing and painting. In the fourth grade, next to me was Carlos Ruiz, who with the crayons would achieve these, would color in the lines quite beautifully just within the lines, and they were nuanced and beautiful. And I would try to do the same. Nah, mine were a mess. But when I took up drawing someone's face, simply looking at the face, at its features and drawing, I was struck at the immense difference in relationship that there was when simply and solely seeing someone's face and trying to record on paper what was seen versus seeing that face and relating to it as actor and critic. Actually elicited a relationship change. The memory of that difference was very striking and never left me. And my drawings actually turned out to be surprisingly better than I thought they would. So what benefits are there to priming and giving strong preeminence to our observer mode? And by implication, simultaneously lowering readiness to engage in actor and critic mode. What is the advantage of being in preeminently observer mode? I'll characterize it as enhancing our ability to observe the situation and to appraise what the situation calls for. And that is important. I will give you one illustration of that importance. Did I share a screen? I did? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So that's but one illustration of the importance of competence at appraising what the situation calls for. We can rephrase it as the ability to competently appraise what the situation calls for, or yet more succinctly, seeing what the situation calls for. So we are less, with observer primed, we are less loaded with preemptive actor or critic dispositions. When I say preemptive, if you approach a situation with an actor disposition of irritability, you will be blind to many values that the situation offers. And they are preemptive of your ability to see those, to relate those to those positive values, and to act on those positive values. And when you are, when those dispositions are quieted, and you are in a simple observer mode, you are better able then to appreciate those values and to act on them. And I will say that after all, the ability to competently appraise and act on what the situation calls for to competently appraise and act on what the situation calls for is, if not the epicenter of mental health, certainly a central pillar of mental health. Most of our trainings as psychologists and psychotherapists have been in approaches that engage with the individual in actor mode or in critic mode. If I ask my client what brings up the tears, moves that prompt emotional expression that make perhaps a relationship change real, asking perhaps a client to write a letter to the deceased one. Things like the person's status being enhanced by the relationship with the therapist. We are generally operating in relationship to the client in actor mode. Moves that rely on helping the client see and understand things differently are directed largely at the critic mode. The utilization of mindfulness engages the client through the observer mode and sets up a platform for better observation and appraisal, less preemptive actor and critic states. And therefore, its applicability is wide. And it is utilized in relationship to a vast range of problems. And you will notice that one of the references that I put is someone talking about whether judges would benefit from doing mindfulness. And in fact, there's research showing that judges, either toward the end of the day or in certain kinds of situations, are definitely more prone to hand out certain judgments versus others. So it can serve both to enhance the competence of the unimpaired, as in reference to the judges, as well as to mitigate the impairments of those who are in deficit states and mired in pathology. I had been doing some mindfulness, which I didn't really identify as such, and advocating it in a not too systematic a way. And I was not doing it with regularity. And when I was doing it with my clients, I thought of it as a reprieve simply from other problematic states. But then I began to hear from some clients that doing it with regularity was helping them a lot. And I also began to attend more to approaches that characterized it as an indispensable tool, such as dialectical behavior therapy and ACT and the writings of others. Then I began to do it in earnest and realized that doing it in earnest regularity generates an enduring enhancement of observer function with, again, widely applicable benefits. And I'll just quickly talk about some personal notes here on it. My first impulse in the morning is to chase chickens around. Recall my reference to ADD. So I awaken into a chicken coop. The New York Times story, the other story that popped up, the coffee, the must-do that I did not take into account, preparing for the demands of the day, that which I don't want to forget, that which I already did forget. I won't even tell you about this morning. The notion, but the notion of sitting on a pillow and focusing on my breath for 15 minutes in the middle of the helter-skelter of the chicken coop is highly counterintuitive. But otherwise, I'm a restless person by disposition, and the idea of sitting to observe my breathing for 15 minutes or longer is not per se attractive. I often have to pull myself by the ear to do it. Yet there has not been a single time once starting it that I am not hooked by the gravitas of the centering, the gravitas of the state of being. And I usually stay longer than the 15 minutes of semi-guided meditation that I've set up through the app of Headspace. I've discovered that most counterintuitively, to sit on a pillow in the middle of the helter-skelter of the chicken coop for 15 minutes results magically in the scenario of each chicken sitting calmly in its perch and with only one methodically and slowly pecking about. I've now noticed that the situation calls for my ending my talk.
Thank you, Walter. That was marvelous. That was marvelous. I'll invite our audience to ask any questions. I'll just make one comment. The whole idea of priming made so much sense to me. And I'm thinking about some of the martial arts training I've had in terms of priming for actor functioning, to not think and just do, and to be able to respond with absolute spontaneity. And some of the tasks we had in our training were similar to throwing that basketball. These were actually little dowels we had to catch, but they could be thrown at any time towards any of us. And we had to catch them and let them go. And it really just moved us towards that pure actor. But I also see the priming of the observer and how valuable that is. Got a couple questions here, so let's start off. Let's see, Fernand.
Walter, thank you so much for an excellent talk. As I was listening to you, something occurred to me that I'd like to offer to you and to the audience and see what you all think about it. And that is the relationship with your excellent formulation of mindfulness with Pete's basic package for coping. So let me read to you the basic package for coping. You can only get certain things from certain things. If you want something, go to where you can get it, not to where you aren't going to get it. You have to respect what's there in order to get out of it what there is to be gotten out of it. You run into trouble if you try to make things what they're not. You won't get what there is there. If you adjust to what's there, then you can work with it successfully. Thoughts, reactions?
Yeah. Observer competence.
Precisely.
And advocacy of reliance on observer.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. So thank you for that.
On a related note, I recall once someone asking Pete in a very casual manner how he was coping with his changes, with the impairments that he developed. And he said in one brief cursory sentence, he says, it's been around for thousands of years.